Okay, Wings Over Broadway football preview show. All Sports Tucson, Andy Morales, Javier Morales, Troy Hutchinson. And we're going to go through, there's a lot. Gwen is the only team that has a bye week this week, so it's going to be a very, very busy week for Southern Arizona. And we just got through recognizing Desert View, and they're in the crowd here. They're all eating. And earlier we talked to Swara about their game with Sabino, and we'll talk a little bit about that later with Coach McKee and Coach McBrayer. But let's go from 6A to 1A. Obviously, there's only one 6A team in Tucson, and that's Tucson High, and they have a region game. They're hosting Alhambra. It should be an easy game for Tucson High. They won big last year, but losing to Pueblo, Tucson High has no margin of victory. So how do you see Tucson High's season going from here?
Justin Hargraves is a really good coach. I'm sure he's got on him this week. Disappointing he lost to Pueblo, but Pueblo is a good team, and I'm sure he's going to stress the positives, especially after a loss. Alhambra is 0-2, Tucson High is 1-1, and if you look at some of their players, Gary Love is a running back. He's really good. He's got almost 200 yards rushing the first two games. Overall talent-wise, you would have to say Tucson High is superior to Alhambra, and Justin Hargraves has been around for a while, and he gets his team up after a loss. So I expect a good performance there, especially at Tucson High.
Well, last season they finished 6-4, winning record and not going to the playoffs. So, like you said, there's no margin of error now. You've got to come out strong, run the football, protect the ball. And when I got a chance to talk to Justin Hargraves about last season, he pointed out that this year their team's going to be driven defensively. They had a lot of new starters on offense, and I think that came out a little bit in the Pueblo game, but he should be able to rally them back in and get them prepared for their game at home this weekend. No, Friday night.
Yeah, with 6A and 5A, obviously they have open division, so you have to probably finish in the top 20 because I think the top 4 or 5 are going to be pulled into the open division. And then moving on to 5A, we have Cienega at Sunny Slope. Cienega is all of a sudden back in the top 10 in the state. I think I'm looking at an easy game there. They beat Sunny Slope 35-7 last year. Ironwood Ridge at Millennium. Close game last year. Iron Ridge is going to try to go to 2-0. If you guys have any comments on that game?
Well, last week they did have the bye week, so this gives you another week to prepare for Millennium. They won a scoreboard didn't show how close that game was against Mountain View. It was 21-7, but it was a grinded out football game. Their offense needs to come a little bit more alive in that game. They were going 3 and out, so expect to see an improvement offensively. Having that bye week, it's a new system, so you had another week to prepare. They should be able to put a little bit more points on the board, but Millennium is a good football team as well.
And obviously Nogales at Desert View, both 1-1. I mean 1-0, and it's going to be a great game. Again, a team that goes at 2-0 in 5A is ahead of the curve. And then Rincon 1-0 at Sunnyside 0-2. Rincon hasn't started 1-0 since 2012, I believe, and Sunnyside hasn't gone 0-2 since 2003, and they won the state championship that year. But if Sunnyside goes 0-3, you have to go back to the 1990s for that to happen. So how do you see Sunnyside rebounding from that loss to Desert View?
I think they're going to rebound well. I think Glenn Posey's going to use it as a learning point. He had his team at Sunnyside before 9 o'clock in the morning Saturday watching film, and he said he basically told me the only good thing to come out of it is he has teaching points to show on the film from what some of the breakdowns they had. And he also has a good record overall, and he's a good coach, good preparation coach. So I think he'll have them ready for Rincon. And Rincon's coach, Mike Strack, is his second year there, so he's developing something. He's from Kansas, and he came here. He has an Arizona background, more in Phoenix, but he's come here and he's trying to make a stamp on his program there in Rincon, and they won their first game, and they won it pretty easily. So they're in the right frame of mind right now. I'm sure they're confident going into that game.
Then we have Empire 0-1 at Douglas, 1-1. Douglas is obviously still reeling from that 8-2 year last year that they had to forfeit so many games that turned to 2-8. So it'll be interesting to see how Douglas season. Of course, they're coached by a former U of A player, Hunter Long, and then Flowing Wells, not the same team as last year, but still great coaching. 0-2, they're going to Palm Desert, 1-1. I think it's going to be a very learning experience season for Flowing Wells. Mountain View, Matt Johnson, can't say enough about Coach Johnson. They had a tough loss. There were some mistakes early on, and they're at Higley. So both teams are looking for a win. Is there anything you want to add about that game?
Well, I think the biggest key from the Ironwood versus Mountain View game for them to take away is don't turn over the football. They had 4 to 5 turnovers in that game, and those could have turned into points. Rather, it's 3, 7. It could have changed momentum. So if they control the football, control the clock, they should be okay because their defense came to play. It's just learning that new offensive system for them, which I'm sure Matt Johnson, with the bye week last week, has gotten them more familiar with that.
And a shout out to Mountain View. I do that Kicks for Kids program, the tennis shoes, and they collected 80 pairs of tennis shoes, $2,500 worth of shoes, and I delivered those shoes today to some Marana elementary schools. And Choya 0-2 at Vista Grande 0-2, looking for one of those teams to go to the win column. And I would never thought I would say this, at least in recent times. Marana 0-2 at Catalina Foothills 0-2. Both teams have not started out 0-2 since 2012. So it's going to be 0-3 since 2012. So it may be a learning curve for both teams, but how do you see that game?
Well, we talked about it last week with Darius Kelly losing that first game to Buena, 35-6, and we wanted to see how they would respond the next week against Cactus. They went up to Cactus and they made it competitive. They only lost by 2 touchdowns, like 14-0, 15-0. So obviously their offense needs a lot of work after scoring 6 points against Buena and nothing against Cactus, but their defense showed some promise against a good team. So I think they're going to turn it on against Marana, who's really struggling. And I think you'll see Darius Kelly get his first win this week on Friday, just by the way they were able to bounce back after that Buena game.
And then South Point, we're going on a 4A. South Point 1-0 at Desert Ridge, 2-0. A lot of people think that this is the first Open Division playoff game. The team that loses this is probably not going to be in the Open Division. A lot of 4A teams are hoping South Point wins this. I mean, especially in the Tucson area. It was a close game last year, but I guess there were some miscues. That was at home. Desert Ridge is going to be waiting, and a lot of people are going to be traveling to Phoenix to watch that game. How do you see that game playing out?
Well, I think it's going to be close yet again, and this time it's on the road at Desert Edge. You have a lot of college prospects on both sides for South Point and Desert Edge. Relatively speaking, I think this game's going to come down to who doesn't turn over the ball and whoever has the ball last. And South Point proved in the game last week that they can throw the ball with Jackson Bolin. He was able to sling the ball around. It's just going to come down to who makes the less mistakes, who doesn't turn over the football. And it should be a good one. And if I didn't have something to go to, I would want to travel out to that game as well.
I think Bijan got like 111 yards. So the state record is probably going to be a little difficult, but he's probably still going to set the big school record for rushing. Apache Junction at CDO. CDO is back. They're 2-0. They won 55-26 last year. They're even better this year. So I'm looking at CDO going 3-0 under Dustin Peace.
What's impressive too, if I remember correctly, Stevie Rocker didn't play last week as well. So they're doing this without one of their best, probably the best player on their team. So once he comes back, what is this team able to do? And that's going to be interesting to see moving forward. And their last game of the year, they have South Point CDO, and I think that's at CDO, if I remember correctly.
That last game is going to be pretty wild, especially if both teams are undefeated, but just go week by week. And then Pueblo at Casa Grande, all of a sudden that's a big game in the 4A. You have Brandon Sanders at Pueblo. great U of A Wildcat alumni. He's going to get up against Randy Robbins, U of A Denver Bronco defender. He's the defensive coordinator for Casa Grande. That's going to be a big game in the desert up in Casa Grande.
I think Casa Grande's defense has only allowed one touchdown in the 2 games, so they're responding to Robbins as the defensive coordinator. Brandon Sanders obviously has his team ready the way they played against Tucson High. So again, that's going to be in Casa Grande. That'd be a nice game to go to. It's going to be up there, and I'm sure Brandon is looking at it as a challenge and seeing how they can do it on the road, be road warriors, and I think it's going to be a defensive struggle, maybe like a 14-7 kind of game, 17-7, 17-10. And who knows who will win? I think Casa Grande playing at home will be tough, but I would say Pueblo, the way they've come around the last couple of years, I think they'll give them a good shot.
And we have Rio Rico at Catalina. Those inner city games are always great to watch. And then Palo Verde at Saurita. I can't remember how many points Palo Verde scored last week, but it was a lot. So I see some fireworks happening down in Saurita. And Amphi at Tanque Verde, I think Amphi coach Jorge Mendivi is going to get his 100th win. He's been around for a while. He's one of the deans of Southern Arizona. I'm looking for a win there. Of course, we're going to talk about Sabino and Saguaro a little bit more in depth in a little bit. But for our sake, it's gone back and forth recently. It's the Rick Botkin Memorial. Sabino's one of the best teams in 3A, and Saguaro's one of the best teams in 4A. So, what do you're going to be at the game? Tell me what you're going to be expecting.
Both teams have good offensive players. Isaiah Davis had more than 200 yards rushing against Buena last week. Saguaro has some good defensive players too. Their sack totals are amazing. Sabino too has a great defense. They have a couple of guys up there in the sack leaders. One of them has 3. I think Trainer, I think his last name is Jackson Trainer. So they have some good defensive talent on that team. It's gonna be interesting to see how Sabino can stop Saguaro's offense. I think that'll be the key. If it'll go down to that, like a defensive struggle, to see which defense is the best.
And not only is it the Rick Botkin game, but it's a rivalry game. I grew up on this side of town. I didn't go to either school, and yet I still knew how much of a rivalry game it is. I mean, that's how big it is on this side of town. When you talk about Sabino, Saguaro, if you go to one of those 2 schools, you guys know they don't like each other in sports. Yes, they're friends outside of that, but to say the least, it's kind of like a U of A ASU rivalry here on the east side, and it's going to be an exciting night, and I'm sure that stadium is going to be packed.
And then the final 3A 4A game is Push Ridge at Walden Grove. I don't know if anyone can stop the Lopez twins, quarterback and Alex and Jordan. I think they each picked up 400 yards of offense last week, so it's going to be a difficult game for Push Ridge. And then we get the smaller schools. We have Benson at Morenci, both 1-0. If you've ever been to a small school game, those are just incredible. Tombstone at San Manuel. Tombstone's looking to go 2-0. Team at Wilcox. Wilcox is always a tough game. Wilcox is going to look to move 2-0. Bisbee looking to go 2-0 against Globe. Santa Rita still looking for that first win for Coach Sanchez, the former Sunnyside coach. I think he might get it this year. They barely lost to San Carlos last year. They're on an 0-25 streak. I don't know if you've been able to speak to Sanchez lately, but do you think this might be the week?
I haven't had a chance to talk to Sanchez, but I've talked to people who know him, and he still has a lot of faith in his team. Obviously, he's not going to give up on them. It's a lack of numbers right now for them. They don't have the depth to handle what he wants to run right now, and he's hoping to build the program gradually. Look at Buena. 2 years ago they were in an 0-21 streak, and now look at them. I think he's hoping at the 2A level he can kind of get it rolling slowly but surely. And I think what it's going to take is for them to win at least 2 to 3 games this year to get that start in the right direction. And they need to win a game like this.
Well, it only takes one. Getting that first win, I think you were saying 0-25 in the last 25 games. Getting that first win is going to be mentally big for that team. So eventually, when they do that, let's see what they do after that, if they can build upon it. And, we're not talking maybe playoffs, but you got to gradually build, and I think they'll be able to do that once they get that first win this year.
And I think also for Sanchez, like Coach Panias, who's here, and Coach McBrayer from Sabino, I think, is in the house. It's also building the future for these young men, and I'm sure that they're picking up a lot. Santa Cruz, believe it or not, Eloy has 6 guys go to the NFL, so that's a really strange program, and they're gonna be 3-0 after this week. And then we get the 1A, Baba Kavari, they're 2-0, and I haven't seen an 8-man game in a couple of years, but I'm hoping to watch this team this year. St. David, 1-0, and Valley Union's 1-1. And those are the 3 1A teams in Southern Arizona. Valley Union's in Elfrida. St. David, I think they're going to build 30,000 homes in that area, so I think this is probably going to be a 2A team pretty soon. And we talked about Buena. They're 1-1, and they're the bye week. And do you want to go over some of the coaching records that you've compiled, or?
Well, we talked about Jorge Mendival. He's going for number 100. We're going to talk to Scott McKee. He's one of only 8 coaches locally that has at least 75 wins. So he's been coaching for 16 years. It's great to have these kind of coaches that have been there for a long time and are not only there for the wins, but for the development of their students and being a part of the community. Because I know you know that a lot more than us. Talking to some of these coaches, that's how they are. They're not about themselves or how many wins they're going to get. They're about putting together the best possible team with the best possible coaching staff and outreaching to their fan base and their community. They come like last. The coaches I've come across, they don't think of themselves as the forefront of the program. They think of other things before that. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, one of the great benefits is being able to email or call or text the coach and say, hey, you're about to win your 200th game, and they're like, what? I have no idea. And their family's more excited about it than they are. So do you have anything to add about this coming Friday?
Well, real quick, going back to the coaches, when you look at them, a lot of them have an Arizona background. If it's at the U of A, from Tucson, they either went to high school here, but having that connection back to the city, I think, is what builds upon that foundation, and I think it's really cool to see. And this Friday, you have a great slate of games, and a couple in city, a couple out of city, so it should be a roller coaster night Friday night.
Okay, for our photographer, Maggie Morales, and my brother Javier, and Troy, and myself, this has been the football preview, and of course we're going to be doing other sports all year here at Wings Over Broadway on Camino Seco, and look forward to being here again next week. Thank you.